Hey guys, welcome to the podcast, Financial Freedom. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. Today's podcast is all about the experience economy, marketing, and fueling growth. And I have a fantastic guest to talk about the experience economy, Dawn Farrow. She's calling to us from London, and she's a marketing strategist and she's a female founder. So I'm really happy to have her on to add value to the show. So, Dawn, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be speaking to you from London.
Yeah, and briefly chronicle your journey, and we'll dive into the topics and the questions of interest.
Wonderful. My current role is that I am indeed a female entrepreneur, and I specifically work in what is projected to be, I read this today, the latest figures tell me a $12 trillion experience economy by 2028. And the exciting thing for me is that I'm very much part of that growth, and I lead not only large-scale marketing campaigns for brands like Squid Game and Friends, but I also grow a global community of sales, marketing, and communicators who also want to learn about selling and marketing in the experience economy.
Yeah.
Sorry, please.
No, go ahead.
No, that's what I do now, but that wasn't my first business. My first business was indeed a marketing agency, still in the experience economy, but that's what makes me, I guess, a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah. And for the audience, just because to define and clarify terminology, what people who haven't heard of the experience economy, describe what it is, some examples.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I very specifically work within the ticketed live experience part of the experience economy. And that means that I essentially create brands and campaigns for things that we don't need in order to fulfill our everyday human needs, but which emotionally we need. So my job is to essentially sell emotion and sell a need to be in the room. And that would include theater experiences, immersive dining experiences, museums, galleries, sporting events, music, anything that I would say fills your soul in a very different way to anything else can.
Yeah. And I really love that because here in America, when you see people shelling out $1,000+ for a Super Bowl or Taylor Swift or even Beyonce, it's quite interesting what people will pay. Moving to client avatar, who follows you, who reaches out to you, who do you work with, who's your customer avatar?
Yeah, so that breaks down to two parts. So the part when I'm a consultant, I very often have promoters, producers, and license holders such as Netflix and Warner Brothers who would come to me and say, this is the experience we're creating of this global brand that we own. And then on the other side of my business, which is called On Sale Group, that is more specifically for the global marketing, sale, and communications industry, the people working on the inside who never find time to get together, never find time to really explore the most up-to-date trends in marketing. And I have a series of events that I run that allow us all to come together globally from across the world to literally keep everybody up to date on everything we're doing to sell more tickets.
Wow, fascinating. What would you say is the pain point or frustration? A lot of times the entrepreneurs that come on the show, they're solving a specific need, and the people that come and sign up for your programs and your events, what are they seeking, or what are their pain points?
I think it's in two parts. So I think that there is that front of mind pain point that I'm very often receive, and that can be, I want to be better at, I want to be more skilled at. But actually what I generally find, because I can find those solutions very quickly, but the real pain points are more to do with the need for community, the need for finding people to support them, and the need for confidence building, actually, because selling things and creating strategies for tickets when it's extraordinarily hard in this kind of economy can be a very lonely job.
Yeah. And moving on to the topics of questions, is what's interesting is for people that for fans or people in your community? You talked about the experience economy. What is going to be, what's hot now, and what are emerging trends to be on the lookout for if people wanted to get in and profit from the experience economy?
Oh, I would love lots of people to get in and profit from the experience economy. There are so many wonderful trends. If you got in on the sphere in any way, you are currently making a fortune. So well done. And I hope that gets to roll out globally. There's some really interesting things. I think that the hot word is still immersive. So if you are presented with something, a large global brand that has the word immersive associated to it, I would definitely explore that. But I would also, as a high net worth individual, I would be exploring funds that very specifically will invest for you across lots of different types of experiences. And I think that's a really interesting and fun way to get involved in what can actually be a really wonderful and quite glamorous world.
Interesting. The follow-up question I have for you is, because you mentioned immersive, and what was interesting was 2020 when the whole world shut down, and you basically had Zoom and online, and then now you have hybrid. People still crave that live. How does one reconcile these two factors when you have technologies such as virtual reality, augmented reality? You're going to have glasses. How is that going to change the experience economy?
Yeah. The first thing is you're right to acknowledge that it has. And I think that is also part of the explosion in terms of growth. What I would say, and interestingly, where we're seeing huge growth across social media, take growth with TikTok, for example, the number one need that comes out of so much of the research they do of their followers is that what their followers are now seeking are in-person events. And there's some wonderful irony to that, I think, that in a world where we spend most of our days glued to technology, the next thing we want to buy is the in-person version of that thing. So I think that is a huge growth area, in the same way that technology meeting AI, meeting in person, meeting dining, meeting, it's just a glorious sort of melting pot of technology and in person.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's because you think that COVID would have shut down live events, but it's actually made it more popular, and people are actually paying more to attend just that in person and to be around all these events, sporting, entertainment. What makes marketing live experiences different and harder than marketing products or services?
I love that. I slightly smile because I think I've never actually marketed anything apart from live experiences. And some days I think, wouldn't it be great just to sell toilet roll? That would be so much easier. And maybe I'm right and maybe I'm wrong. But the reason it's hard is because you don't need what I'm selling. And so much of my time is spent around training teams and working with teams around the need to find the story and what is the benefit for that person to come and buy a ticket for your experience. And actually, you can very easily, we talk a lot about building funnels across all marketing. And so building awareness is hard enough, but very doable. Then you get to this mid part of the funnel. Okay, there's a bit more, like you can slowly bring them across the line. But that conversion, that moment where you're saying, I will give you $100 and you will give me an experience in maybe 3 months' time. It's a really peculiar ask. And so I think that exchange is extremely hard and takes real skill that actually only happens over time, I think.
And then a follow-up question I have for you is, what are the biggest mistakes do you see organizations make when marketing live events today?
I think the biggest mistake is that people run to say buy a ticket too quickly. And what can happen, many of the experiences that we work on across the globe, we'll be working on things quietly now that we won't actually announce for perhaps another 2 years. But interestingly, because we have worked on it for 2 years, we can fall into a trap of thinking, oh, isn't everybody aware that this is happening? And so when we finally announce, we are confused when people aren't waiting for the news. And we must always remember that the moment we announce, that is the beginning of the storytelling. It's the next, for the potential customer, you're literally at the beginning of that path to purchase. Everything that has come before, it's just research. And I think that is the biggest, it can be a huge frustration, but it is the reality of announcing experiences nowadays.
And the follow-up question I have for you is, because you mentioned this distinction when marketing and selling live or tickets to live events versus just selling, for example, toilet paper or paper towels. What role does community and fans play in marketing live events compared to just like restaurants or just toilet paper, paper towels?
Yeah. It can be the difference between a project that, that makes money for the next 20 years and a project that essentially could be superb, could have had the most wonderful reviews, but for some reason never created what we would refer to as fandom. You can only take, perhaps a very good example would be a musical called Six, which came out of the UK, the most wonderful musical. And they started on the smallest of budgets, and they created and curated the most amazing group of fans who ultimately created a huge success for those producers, which is why now the show is in Japan, it's on Broadway. It's just truly exciting when fandom really takes hold.
Yeah, and it's actually quite a very interesting. It's almost like this because you see it just these. It's like these. It's like when a social media post goes viral or just somebody just catapults to TikTok or Instagram, YouTube stardom, and it's just this fan base and community, and it's something that takes skill. So rounding it out, we have around 5-10 minutes. What advice do you have for the female audience listeners for that want to become entrepreneurs, founders? Because you have a very interesting background in dance, and then you built an agency and you sold it right before the pandemic. Talk about that journey and lessons learned.
So many lessons. I think that, so I speak to you today, both as an entrepreneur, but also as a very proud female leader, and also as a wife, and also as a mum. And as you can imagine, that has come with its joys and its challenges. I knew at a very early age that I was not best suited to wanting to work for someone, although the years I did do that, I enjoyed very much. But because I knew that wasn't what I was destined for, I always feel I have made it slightly harder for myself. And I would say, if you have that in you, I would say you owe it to yourself to try. And so as you rightly pointed out, my first business was a marketing agency, and I was absolutely determined to do that on my own. And the lesson learned there, no surprises everybody, is that is extremely hard. And I don't take any of that back, because I realize now that was absolutely part of my journey. But it does mean that now I have set this business up quite differently. I would also say to all entrepreneurs that with absolute kindness, nobody is coming to save you. And I think that this idea that you can have the hustle, you can have the spirit, and you understand, oh, I've got to do it. But I also see a lot of entrepreneurs who perhaps do have somebody wealthy behind them who will catch them when they fall. Those of us that don't, keep going, right? Because nobody is saving you, and you owe it to yourself to keep going. So I know it's hard, but I also know that keeping going, what I would refer to as grit, and maybe quite an English terminology, but that grit and determination and consistency is why you will win above anybody else.
Yeah, and we were talking backstage where in the green room where you really can't depend on a job or a government, and it's actually safer to go out and work for yourself and create something of value. So the other question I have for you is final thoughts is why building a career in an industry you're passionate about is the best decision you can make.
Oh, I love that. It really is. It absolutely is the best thing you can do. There is some considerations when you work in arts and culture, particularly that, oh, I'll be forever unable to pay my rent. And don't get me wrong, there is plenty of that in the freelance world. However, if you have a smart strategy, if you are, we go back to that idea of resilience, if you're clear on what you want to become, there really is no limit to what you can earn. And the joy for me is that every day I can go and experience something, even perhaps I'm working on it, or that I just think this will fill my soul. I love doing this, will make me feel better. And I can't imagine ever not working in experiences in some way.
How can people connect with you and follow you on social media, reach out to you and work with you?
Wonderful. So on Instagram, you can go to dawn.onsalegroup, and I have lots of marketing tips there. And then otherwise, my community and the global marketing and sales group, that is through onsale.live. And if you are a producer, promoter, or you're building the next gigantic global experience, then come to dawnfarrow.com.
Excellent. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know you really inspired the audience, and we talked about the experience economies. And thanks so much for coming on, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's great to speak to you.